Hello everyone and welcome back. In this lesson, we are going to look at move, scale, rotate and duplicate. Now these four functions are very important and you will probably use them on a daily basis. When using Blender, you are going to move objects around, you are going to rotate your objects, scale them and also duplicate things. So let's delete all of this. Another shortcut that you can use to select everything in the scene is simply by pressing A on the keyboard. A is for all. Now I can press X to delete and then just click delete to delete all those objects. So now let's create something simple like a cube. So I'm going to press Shift A and then it's going to bring up the add menu, then point to mesh cube. So that's going to create a new cube object for us. So make sure you have your cube selected. So as you can see, if I click on it, it will have a little outline. That way you know that it is selected. To move it all around, you need to use a shortcut G. G is for grab. So press G just once. And now if you move your mouse around, you'll see that you are moving that cube around. So you are grabbing it and moving it around. To rotate, you will use the R shortcut for rotate. So with a cube selected, press R, and as you can see, we can now rotate our cube very simple. Another thing you can do is you can scale your object, and the shortcut for that is S is for scale. So make sure you have your cube selected and then press S once, and now you can move the mouse. Now you can see that you can make the cube smaller or bigger. Something to note is where your cursor is when you press the shortcut. So if I'm really close to the object and I press S for scale, you can see that I only have this little movement here to scale this object. And if I move my cursor further away from the object and then press S to scale, I have much more control. The same goes for rotate and moving. So if I'm really close to the object with my cursor and I press R, it's going like this. But if I move my cursor further and then press R, it's going to give me that much more control. Next, let's see how we can duplicate our object. So to duplicate an object, make sure that you select that object and then the shortcut is Shift D. So hold Shift, press D once, and now you can just move your mouse. So we already duplicate object or a duplicate copy of that object. I can also select both of these objects now and press Shift D to duplicate both of them. Now we got 4 cubes. You can also select all of them and press G to grab them all and move them all at the same time. And you can also do the same with rotate. Or we can press S for scale to scale all of them. So let's delete all of this. Okay, now let's create a new cube. Now let's say you want to move this cube, but you only want to move it on the x-axis, which is the red line. Now to do that, select your cube, then press G to grab it, and then press X to specify that you only moving on the x-axis. press escape to cancel it. Now let's try with the y-axis. So with a cube selected, press G to grab and then Y, and that's then going to specify that you only want to move it on the y-axis. So you can obviously just click and that will save or place the location, or you just can press escape. Now let's try and grab on the z-axis. Now the z-axis is up and down. So with a cube selected, press G to grab and then Z to move it up and down. Now if you want to go a little bit more advanced, you can also specify two axes at a given time. So let's say I want to grab this. I want to move this box around, but I only want to move it on the X and Y except Z. So I want to move it basically left and right and forward and backwards, but I don't want to move it up and down. So to do that, we press G to move it, and then you want to press Shift and then the axis that you want to exclude. So I'm going to press Shift Z. Now it's only going to move on the X and the Y axis. So in this instance, we want to exclude the Z axis. So let's try that again with two different axes. Maybe we want to move it on the Y and the Z axis, but we want to exclude the X axis. So I'm going to press G and then Shift X because we want to exclude the X axis. Now you can see it's moving up and down and also on the Y axis, but it's not moving on the X axis. Now we can do the same with the rotate. So I'm going to press R to rotate and then I'm going to press X, and I can see it's rotating only on the X axis. Okay, let's try that with a Z or the Y axis. So I'm going to press R to rotate and then Y to rotate around the Y axis. Now we can do the same with the Z axis. So I'm going to press R to rotate and then Z to rotate only around the Z axis. Now let's look for scale. So I select the object and then press S to scale, and then I'm going to press X, and now it's going to scale only on the X axis. Let's try the same for the Y axis. So press S to scale and then Y, and now it's going to scale on the Y axis. And then let's try the same for the Z axis. So I'm going to press A to scale and then Z to only scale in the Z axis, as you can see there. We have learned how to duplicate already. We can do Shift D and then press X, and it's going to move that duplicated copy only on the X axis. You can also just press Y to move it on the Y axis or Z to move it on the Z axis. And then I can click and it's going to kind of position it, or it's going to lock its position wherever it click. Now I want to talk about scale. Click on your cube object and then press N for November to bring up this side menu. Now as you can see, we got our location, our rotation and our scale. Now the scale is currently set to 1:1:1. So it's mean one scale on the x-axis, one scale on the y-axis, and one scale on the z-axis. Now if I scale this object, let's just press S and scale it. You can see now the scale value is now increased. If I scale it in one axis, like if I press S and X, you will see that it will only affect one of this scale. You can obviously click here and drag as well to adjust the scale from this parameter. Something that you need to note when doing any scale adjustment inside of Blender, it is always a good practice to reset the scale value back to 1. So the scale values for X, Y, and Z, they should always be 1, 1, 1. Now obviously, if you change your object and you scale it on the X, you are going to have different parameters. Now there's a really easy way to reset these numbers back to 1. Now let's quickly talk about why this is important to have a scale of 1, 1, 1. The problem comes in every time you will now do some 3D modeling on this object. With the scale that is not set to 1, 1, 1, that can cause issues when doing things like an inset or a bevel or different edit parameters. I know that sounds a little bit complicated or a bit confusing, but it is always just a good practice to set to 1, 1, 1 scale. Let me show you quickly how easy to reset this object scale to 1, 1, 1. Select your object and then press Ctrl A. Now Ctrl A is going to bring up the apply menu, and then you simply click on scale, and that basically means it's going to apply the scale transformations. And I can see these scale values have reset back to 1, 1, 1. There are also another way to reset the scale back to 1, 1, 1. Go to the object menu here above the 3D viewport, then go to apply and then click on scale. So this is also can reset the scale back to 1, 1, 1. So those are basically the how you move an object, how you scale an object, and how you rotate and duplicate the object. So I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye.